Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. My name is Heavenly for those who don't already know me, and for those who do, I just want to apologize. I know I've been gone for a really long time. I've been very busy, and I will explain why I've been so busy actually later on in this video. As you can tell by the title of this video, I'm going to be going through a little bit about my education journey, and the cat is climbing the tripod. I apologize. A little bit about my journey in education. If you don't already know me, then you may not know that I have not had the most traditional educational journey so far. I dropped out of college when in 2020, and since then the journey has been a little bit different to what you might expect. So the whole purpose of this video is essentially for me to explain the journey that I did go through, hopefully be a source of inspiration for anyone else who might be feeling like their traditional education route isn't necessarily for them, and just to reassure you and let you know that there are options. These are the things that I chose for myself, and it worked out in the way that I'm going to explain. But you know, you have your own path, and at the end of the day, I'm always going to promote doing what works for you and listening to yourself, listening to your body and your mind and what's going on internally to decide what your externals need to be looking like in terms of where you're actually going to position yourself, whether that is in school, on the traditional path, or maybe choosing something else. So without further ado, let's just get straight into it. So before I actually talk about dropping out of college itself, I'm just going to give you a little bit of a backstory as to what led me to that point so that you can sort of understand how we ended up where I am now. So I did my GCSEs in 2020. I did them in the pandemic era. Was not a fantastic time, and as you can imagine, as I'm sure anyone else who did their GCSEs in 2020 could understand and sort of sympathize with, it was a very precarious time in terms of education. Doing your exams in that time meant that, first of all, I didn't even do them. I didn't do my GCSEs. I did my mocks before the pandemic, but the time when I was actually supposed to be doing my real exams would have been right in the peak of the pandemic, and at that time everyone was in lockdown, so I never actually completed them. So that essentially meant that the grades that I was given was a combination of predicted grades and past grades that you sort of achieved during your mocks. Now, as you may know, statistically, students see the most amount of growth in the period between their mocks and completing their actual exams. To be fair, don't quote me on that, but that's what my teacher told me anyway, and based on her 10 years of teaching or however long of teaching, that is what she knew to be true, and personally I don't think that she's wrong. However, I was actually to be fair, I was one of the lucky ones in the sense that I didn't fail any of my GCSEs, but I know for a fact I didn't do as well as I could have if I'd have actually completed the exams. I was studying very hard at the time, and was putting in a lot of work to sort of tick off the last few things that I needed in order to achieve those top grades. My predicted grades weren't necessarily bad, they were actually quite good in all honesty, so I'm not mad at the grades that I did get, but it didn't put me in the best position, or the position that I personally feel I could have been in had I have actually been able to complete the exams. So that's just a little bit of backstory for you. Also, if you see my eyes like flicking over there, it's because that's where my notes are, so bear with. Okay, so alongside this, I need to remember to actually look at the camera. I always end up looking at myself and it's so bad. So alongside this, it meant that I didn't actually finish school. It was very abrupt. It was sort of like one day we were going to school every day, everything was fine, then suddenly we just never went ever again. I think I went in for one day, like maybe after a month of not going to school. I went in for one day and then got sent home, and then that was basically it. There was no like finishing. So as you can imagine, my sort of where my mind was at the time was very like, what am I gonna do? Like, I was pretty much in panic mode, but I did sort of play it cool for a long period of time throughout 2020, and I sort of just figured I was gonna use the year to the best of my ability. If I wasn't going to be in school for a long period of time, I actually used that as an opportunity to start my first business. I'm not going to get into that because I'll do a separate video on that if people find it interesting, I don't know, but the point is I started a business during that time, and that will become more relevant later on in my story. So this mood was kind of somber because I never actually got to finish school in like the traditional sense. There was no like prom, there was no like leavers. When we were collecting our results, it's kind of like get in, get out, job done kind of thing. So the mood was a bit, it was on a decline, but I was staying positive. I was making sure that I was keeping myself productive. I started a business. I was doing a lot of stuff on that side of things, and that sort of carried me throughout the summer, and that is what I was spending my time doing. So then by the time it was time to sort of decide where I was going next, I decided on a sixth form. Now this sixth form was not necessarily close to where I lived, but it wasn't extremely far, but it wasn't necessarily close. It wasn't in the same area from where I was actually from, so there was a bit of travel involved when it came to actually going to school, and that's going to become relevant in a moment. Fast forward to September, I've started at sixth form. I'm studying at the, so originally I had actually wanted to go into politics, but at the time I was very much trying to decide whether I wanted to go into politics or focus on marketing, because I wanted to go into like marketing and PR, that side of things, but due to the pandemic, I did a lot of soul searching, and I decided I actually wanted to go in more of a creative route rather than pursue politics. So I didn't go to the school that I would have gone to had I have chosen to pursue the politics route, and instead I went to a different one because the course was a lot more geared towards the creative side of things and what I wanted to study in terms of creative. So I went to this school. Now, because of the virus, the school was operating in something called bubbles, which essentially meant that they didn't want classes to mix. So that meant no extracurriculars, you can't show up too early, you can't stay too late, you go to your lesson, and it meant that you only did, I think, like one lesson per day. Now, that meant that I was spending equal, if not the same amount of time on public transport as I was in class. Because I would spend, say, an hour, possibly more if there was traffic. Now, I know, just as a disclaimer, I could have gotten the train, but even then, like, one, it's costly, and two, it's still relatively time consuming. I can't just turn off my laptop, and that's very rude of him. But anyway, one, it's costly, and two, it's still relatively time consuming. But I was getting the bus, so it was taking me an hour, sometimes a little bit more, to actually get to school, and only for a 2-hour lesson before having to travel an hour, possibly more, back home again. It was a waste of my time and money, or at least that's how I felt at the time. So after a while, I sort of was getting very sick of this sort of way of going. It was like there was nothing to really engage my brain outside of lesson time. I was going to lesson, going back home, working on the business. Sure, that's great, but I sort of missed that contact with other people. I think it took all of one weekend, actually. I believe the story sort of goes like this. On Thursday, I decided, you know what, I'm kind of sick of this. Let me look for some alternatives. Maybe whether that's going to a different college or, you know, doing something else, which turned out to be an apprenticeship. Now, backtrack a little bit. When I was even choosing what colleges I should apply to, I discovered that there was this one course called graphic communications, and it had everything that I wanted to study in it. And the reason why I ended up going to this particular college is because it was one of like 4 that actually did graphic communications as a subject, or at least it was at the time. I don't know what it's like now, but there wasn't very many. So when I was sort of looking at which colleges I'm going to go to as an alternative, I didn't really have many options. So which is why I sort of decided, okay, what if I try to do an apprenticeship? On Thursday, I started doing research into apprenticeships. On Friday, I found an apprenticeship that I really liked. On Saturday, I invited someone over that actually worked in the industry that I wanted to go into, which was advertising. I had a conversation with them, I asked them what it was like, and it turned out that their company was actually had apprentices. So I applied for one apprenticeship, spoke to them about applying for an apprenticeship at that company. By Tuesday, I had left school. So my first apprenticeship was in something called advertising and media, and that was the name of the course. And for those who don't know, the way that apprenticeships are essentially structured is you work a full-time job. So you work a 9 to 5. You have either 1 day per week, or maybe like a week, a month, or something like that, where it's your dedicated study time, and then you're learning the course at the same time as you're working. So my full-time job was as the advertising media executive, and that just meant that I was in control of the social media, so planning and creating the social media for this company, I contributed to actually creating the advertising campaign plans that you'd give out to clients. I did UX design. I did a whole host of things. If you want a separate video specifically on my first apprenticeship, then just let me know and I can do that. But I did a whole host of things in this position, and at the same time, you have something called an apprenticeship provider, and that is essentially the school that you go to. And this learning provider are the people that train you up to basically be qualified in the job role that you're actually doing. So you're gaining experience at the same time as learning and being trained in this job role that you're meant to be fulfilling. And by this way, you get paid as well. You get paid an apprenticeship salary, but 9 times out of 10, in all of the ones at least I've seen so far, you get to keep your job at the end of your apprenticeship, and then they usually increase your salary after your apprenticeship, after you're fully qualified. Sounds great. However, yeah, again, I had found myself. So I started in December 2020, and I actually left my position before the apprenticeship was over in October 2021. For reasons I'm about to outline. So throughout the course of my apprenticeship, as previously mentioned, I was working for an advertising company. I don't know if that was previously mentioned actually. I was working for an advertising company, and this particular company was in diversity media. So it was something that was very much close to home. As you can see, I'm diverse. And if you already know me, you'll know that diversity is something that's very important to me. I very much care about a number of different social issues, and so this company was very much a accurate reflection of the things that I actually cared about. So I took my job seriously. That job was really, really important to me. So was the company. However, unfortunately, throughout the course of my apprenticeship, I found myself getting very sort of bogged down by the brunt of actually working for this company. Now, I think I might even do a separate video on this a little bit more, on the differences between working for a small company and a large company. But I was working for a startup, and one of the big things about working for a startup is that your job will very rarely actually be what is in the job description, because when you work for a startup, it's sort of very hands-on, it's very collaborative, you're working with a lot of people, and you sort of, it's the culture of working there to help each other out. And as someone that is not necessarily, I'm quite a helpful person, I don't mind helping out. However, as an apprentice, disclaimer for anyone that's wanted to be an apprentice, there are definitely pros and there are cons. So pros with that, I got to work with a lot of really, really talented people. I learned so much. I think I actually learned more from my colleagues than I did actually doing the training, and that is one of my favorite things about being an apprentice. You learn things that isn't necessarily on the curriculum because you're surrounded by such talented people from completely different walks of life, number one, who studied completely different things, number two, and who have completely different jobs, number three. So I was learning a lot, but it also meant that I was helping people with a lot of work. I was helping people with a lot of different things. So that's why when I say to you, like, I was doing social media and UX design and campaign creation and copywriting and video editing, I was doing so many different things. I was even creating newsletters at one point. Like, I was doing so many different things, interviewing. It's honestly, the list goes on. And it meant that I gained so much experience, but it also meant that when you keep saying yes to things, it becomes sort of the expectation that you're going to continue to say yes regardless of your workload. So I was sort of getting really bogged down with trying to balance. Number one, I was running a business at the same time, as I previously mentioned, and that very much had to get put on the back burner after a certain point in the year because I just couldn't handle it anymore. Number two, I was obviously working full time doing these 11 different jobs. And number three, I was still technically meant to be studying. I say meant to be because that also low-key got put on a back burner after a certain point. Meant to be studying to pass my apprenticeship. I'm a big believer in making sure that you are always in an environment that is conducive to your progress, right? And if your mental health is on a decline, if your physical health is deteriorating, if you find yourself losing sleep because of stress and your workload is just insane, these are not things that's conducive to your progress. You can't really expect yourself to keep, going higher and higher and higher and getting better and better and better at your job when you can't even go to bed when it's bedtime. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you that it was all bad, because it wasn't. I did learn a lot, and I think it definitely grew me as an individual, being in that kind of environment. To be honest, I think I can handle any job at this point. At this point in my life, I think I'll be fine in any kind of position. because of the last 2 years and because of the experience that I was in. So this is in no way a means to deter you from taking an apprenticeship. I'm just going to give you the real. And the real is, it's not all sunshine and roses. I know that a lot of people kind of promote apprenticeships and being like, yes, you can work and make money and it's great and you're learning and you don't get into debt. That's wonderful. All of those things are true. It's completely true. However, there are certainly pros and cons. So I will just want to make sure that I'm giving you a balanced view. And it's very much dependent on where you work. And I'm going to get into that in a second. So, back to the story. So, at this point, I was definitely learning a lot about myself and learning a lot about how you can actually take care of your mental health. And I've actually recently done a workshop on taking care of your mental health in the workplace. And I think that will be something that I talk about quite a lot, both on this channel and in workshops that I host and stuff like that. Because, do I sound really nasally? My nose is blocked, by the way, so I'm just going to put that out. Sorry if I sound really nasally, because I'm just like, I'm hearing myself back and it's a bit gross. So anyway, so at this point, I'm thinking to myself, right, I might need to take a step back. I'm 17 at this point. I'm like, right, I've been aged about 6 years working here. No, I'm joking. But I did have to kind of sit myself down and have a serious chat with myself and be like, yo, do you think you can do this? Like, there comes a moment for everyone where you kind of do have to be honest with yourself and really ask yourself, is this conducive to my progress? Am I wasting away in this position, or is it doing me good? And to be totally honest with you, it wasn't doing me any good anymore. So I requested a holiday. You know, I took some time off. I came back and I was sort of still being faced with the same issues. And to be totally honest with you, technically I didn't resign. My mum resigned for me, but I'm gonna get into that. So basically, there was an incident at work, and my mum was basically like, listen, Herbs, I know you want to finish this apprenticeship, but, and she said everything that I basically just echoed to you. So it came down to it, and I did have to resign from the position. I'm very grateful for the role. I'll never take away from how much it taught me, and to the level and depth that actually taught me about myself and about what I want out of my life, what I want out of my career, and the things I'm willing to sacrifice for those things. That's another thing. I think I was definitely someone that sort of thought that I would give anything for success, and that is not true. I now know my boundaries. I know where my hard lines are. I know where I'm willing to compromise, and these are all things that I genuinely believe. I won't know because I didn't go to college, will never go to college, and that's just the path that I chose. But I genuinely do believe I wouldn't have learned these specific things had I stayed in sixth form, especially not in the way that it was at the time, because there just wasn't enough interaction. There's so much that I learned through interacting with these different people. Bearing in mind, I was the youngest employee there, so I was working with 40-odd-year-olds, learning from them on a daily basis. There are things that I could not have possibly learned, I don't think, at least, if I had stayed in sixth form. So again, pros and cons. So we've been talking about this for a long time. So to cut a long story short, I did end up leaving, and I had left, as I said, October 2021. Between October 2021 and January 22, I was out of work. I was taking a break, and to be completely honest with you, my sort of self-worth did hit a dip during that winter. So I'm a very goal-oriented individual, and for better or worse, I do sort of place a lot of pressure on myself to achieve certain things. One of the bad sides to that is that when I was out of work, I did kind of beat myself up about it. I was kind of like, you know, oh, you should have continued, you should have just finished your apprenticeship, yada yada yada, all of that. One thing that I really learned is not to attribute your self-worth to your achievements. Yes, it's great that I was working at a young age. However, it doesn't make me any less of a successful person. It doesn't make me any less of a worthy individual that I wasn't in work anymore. And I just want to give you that disclaimer, because should you follow this same path and should it not necessarily work out, or even if you go on a different path and it just, or you're in a position right now where it's not necessarily working the way that you want it to be working, I know that it's really easy for you to sort of fall into that pitfall of sort of beating yourself up about it, but at the end of the day, you're still a worthy individual. You're still worthy of love. You're still worthy of, you know, people's time and attention and just care. You're still worthy of all of those things, regardless. Like, those months that I spent out of work really had an effect on me, and it took a lot for me to get to this point now where I'm actually comfortable in my story, to be honest, and comfortable in the way that things happened, and you know, how everything played out, and you know, just coming to terms with the fact that I am still worthy of all of these things regardless of what position I'm in my life. You know, it did take a lot for me to eventually build up the courage to actually apply for a new job, because I was kind of like, well, what am I going to do now? Do you know what I mean? So I decided that I still wanted to do an apprenticeship. I wasn't done. Like, I didn't feel satisfied yet, you know. I didn't get to finish my first apprenticeship, and I just didn't feel like I was ready to give up, you know what I mean? So it did take a lot. I spent a lot of days, to be totally honest with you, I spent a lot of days in my bed, just laying there, contemplating life. Like, I had a whole main character moment. Like, I felt so displeased, and to be honest, I did kind of feel sorry for myself a bit. Like, it did take a while before I actually kind of just got over myself. No hate to my past self, but I did have to get over myself a little bit and kind of be like, you know what, life happens, innit? Not everything's gonna go to plan, not everything's gonna go your way, you know. We move, let's go. So I started applying to new jobs. Bro, I got a couple no's. I got a fair bit of no's. It did not help my whole getting over myself thing at all. I remember I even had one particular job. I think I had 2 different interviews. I've got the second round of interviews, and you know, the way they were speaking to me, they really had me convinced I was gonna get this job. And the way I didn't get the job, like, I was gutted. So anyway, one day came, and I got a call from my apprenticeship provider. If you've already heard of Multiverse, that's the provider that I used for my second apprenticeship. I highly recommend them. They're a brilliant apprenticeship provider. I got a call from Multiverse, and they were basically like, oh, we've just had these new positions open up for a company called Mediacom. Mediacom is an advertising agency, and you know, we think you'd be a really great fit. We think you should apply. So I was like, okay, cool. Let me take a look. I'll apply. Yada yada. Cut a long story short, I got the job. If you want a separate video more in depth about my application process, because there was a few steps to it, my application process for my second apprenticeship with Multiverse, and just a little bit more information on how my apprenticeship actually ran, because like stuff like EPA and the exams and all of that, let me know and I'll do a separate video on that, because I do feel like that's a lot of relatively beneficial information. This job was very different to my first position for a number of reasons. One of which being, the biggest reason being, because this was a corporate position. The Mediacom is a very big company. Even the London office is split between 2 different buildings. The whole structure of it is completely different. In my first position, you know, it was like a team of like maybe 20 people. This is now hundreds of people, 2 different buildings. You got big, I mean, I'd worked with big clients before, like pretty sizable companies before, but like every client was a big client at this point. It's a very, very different position. I faced a lot of imposter syndrome, to be completely honest with you. After being unemployed, after feeling like a failure, first of all, for not finishing my first apprenticeship, and then somehow landing, like, I felt like it was somehow landing this role in a corporate apprenticeship, I really felt out of my depth. I felt like I shouldn't have been there. I felt so many different things that, to be completely honest with you, wasn't even true. I really did just feel like I shouldn't have been there, and I did have a lot of anxiety surrounding the position for quite a long time. But you know, I got over it. I got stuck in, you know, it was great. Now, another reason why it was really different is my first position was in creative. My job was to basically create stuff, create websites, create copy, create designs, graphics, whatever. That was my job. My second position was, I was a paid search account executive apprentice. Very long title, which basically just meant that I worked in paid search advertising. Now, I'm not going to get into what paid search is too much, but to cut a long story short, the ads, when you type something in on Google and then you see the first like 3 things are ads, that was my job. My job, make those ads, manage those ads, yada yada. Cool. The thing is, I didn't know anything about paid search. I didn't even know if I liked it. I didn't even know if I could do it. I applied and I got the job, and that was that. However, I relatively quickly discovered that it was not for me. It just wasn't great enough for me. Like, my job was basically like manage data and doing stuff like that, and I'm just, anyone that knows me knows that's not my portion, innit? Hats off to people that can do those kind of things. That is amazing. And you know what, I appreciate the fact that I learned it, because now I've unlocked a new set of skills that I just didn't have before, and I probably, like, had I have stayed on the creative path, I wouldn't really have had need to learn what I've now learned. So it's great, and really kudos to people that do those jobs, because it takes a lot of effort and a lot of attention to detail that I just simply, like, listen, my ADHD brain, like, this thing, that's not my portion in it. That's just, some people are good at some things. That's, yeah. So anyway, that took a lot for me to kind of wrap my head around and, you know, get used to. And, you know, it was all very new to me. And what obviously didn't help was the fact that I'm very young. I was one of the younger apprentices. Like, there were apprentices that were like in their early 20s, and I was only 18 by this point. Well, I turned 18 during the apprenticeship. So I was one of the younger ones, like, in my team as well. They were all like in their 20s, and I had certain members in the company sort of treating me a little bit different to others. You know, it's normal, you're a group of adults in a really big building. Oh, that's another thing. To anyone that hasn't had a job before, like in office or anything like that, it's exactly the same as secondary school. Like, it's the same. You're just older and there's laws instead of school rules. Like, there's no detention, but the amount of overtime you work, it feels like detention anyway. So it's all the same. Oh, my notes have gone. Boom. So it's all the same to pretty much. So I had some people kind of approach me in slightly a different way than others might have approached me. And listen, I'm not gonna point out any differences I may have had, whether it was my age, whether it was something else. I don't know, I don't care. But quite frankly, I appreciated some people's attitude towards me a little bit more than I appreciated other people's attitude towards me. And that's just how it is. That's just what you're gonna face when you're working in a working environment, and that's just what it is. You're here to do a job, so honestly, just don't give too much attention to it. You'll just do your job and go home. Like, it's that simple. So that was pretty much the way that I looked at it. I learned quite early on from my first job that that's just the nature of how working works, and you know, you get on with it, and you make it. You honestly, it is what you make it, is what I'm trying to say. Outside of all of my stuttering, it honestly is what you make it. I made some really nice friends in my second position. I learned so much. Like, even people that you might not necessarily even like too tough, still learn from them. Still, like, it takes a lot, trust me, it's not easy, but still humble yourself just enough to learn from them and see what they have to say. They will still make valid points. They will still, like, you even have to kind of register within yourself. There are people that are not gonna like you, but you still have good things to say. I'm sure you have great ideas. I'm sure there's things that you can learn and teach people, but there are going to be people that don't like you, and that's just the nature of life. Do you know what I mean? So even people that you might not necessarily take to, at the end of the day, you're all in a team. You're all there to reach a common goal. You know, still learn from them, still listen to them, see what they have to say, because at the end of the day, dude, if you're gonna do anything, at least learn. Do you know what I mean? I didn't finish my first apprenticeship, that's fine, but I learned so much. Like, if you're gonna do anything, at least learn, and let that be the minimum. Set the bar there. So anyway, my second apprenticeship, it definitely taught me a lot. I now know that I don't want to work in paid search, but I also know how to run paid search ads, which I didn't know how to do before. You know, I'm quite equipped in terms of, like, mentally equipped in terms of social and how social advertising works. But I had no idea that search even existed before this particular position. So if you want to take anything from that, I would say don't be afraid to branch out a bit, even if it isn't necessarily your cup of tea. Don't be afraid to branch out a bit, because at least you know, and at least you have a new set of skills that, you know, you can pull out your back pocket. You know, if I ever need a quick bag, I can run a little search campaign, like do a little freelance for some company. I don't know if they do freelance in that, but there's some skills that I can just pull out my back pocket if I ever need it. So there's that, and there's my front door. So let me open the front door and come back to you. My second job, boom, we're in it, we're learning a bunch of stuff, it's great. There was some hard parts, there was some good parts, and I finished it. I'm actually really pleased with the fact that I can say that my second apprenticeship I did actually finish. I completed all of the examination process, and as I said, I might do a separate video on that. And I'm actually really happy to be able to say that I got a distinction. So, and honestly, it is because of my mindset. Like, being able to just really put yourself in the position of saying, look, this might not be an ideal situation, this might not be necessarily something you're interested in, whatever, but do you know what? I really love marketing. I'm really happy that I got to study marketing. I got to learn 2 different types of advertising throughout my journey. When at the beginning of my journey, when I started in college, I didn't know anything. Like, I understood the gist of it enough for me to have taken an interest in the industry, in the advertising industry, but I didn't actually know how to run campaigns, and that's something that I can now say I'm very confident in. I'm confident in taking a campaign from A to B, and that is, I'm so grateful to be able to sit here and say that, and even more so grateful to say I'm qualified. I'm a qualified digital marketer now, and that wouldn't have been the case if I'd have stayed in sixth form. So, you know, if you do know what you want to do in life, honestly, just pursue it. just pursue it. And if you take anything away from this video, I really want it to be that. This camera is lopsided. If you take anything away from this video, I really want it to be, if you have a goal, if you have something that you're really interested in, look into that interest a little bit more. Maybe don't drop out college. I'm not saying that. If anyone, please don't drop out college and be like, I saw a video and this girl says drop out college. Don't follow me like that. If that's your portion, bro. But I never said that. I never said that. So, you know what? Honestly, the bottom line really is, if you've got something that you're pursuing, please just go for it. Don't be afraid. There's a lot of fear that can be attached to doing things that have never been done before. Or if you just don't know anybody that's done what you think you might want to be doing. But bro, go for it. Like, listen, no one in my family has done an apprenticeship. I have one auntie, so technically she's my cousin, but my auntie, my mom's friend's daughter, she's an apprentice and she's done some amazing stuff. Her career is incredible. She's like one of the best apprentices ever. Like, literally, she's been awarded for being one of the best apprentices ever. And that was basically it. Like, that was what I had to look up to, and that was like that was all I really had. So, you know, going ahead and doing what you don't necessarily have like a blueprint for, it can be really scary. But if you truly believe, you have to believe in yourself first and foremost. If you truly believe that you could do it, and you know, obviously isn't just all mindset, like what life doesn't work like, wait, I don't want to give up like this toxic positivity vibe where it's just like, yeah, if you believe in yourself, everything will be. No, it was hard, as you can see from my journey. It was hard. I had to get therapy. Like, don't be afraid to seek help as well. Like, I did have to get actually go into therapy during my second position, just to get myself back into grips with handling corporate life. Corporate life is not for everybody, and that's another thing. Whether it's working for a small business or working in corporate, there is a different type of situation, and I might even go even more in depth in that another time, on another occasion. But not everything is for everybody, so you really have to listen to yourself. But you would never know what you prefer. No, I prefer working for small businesses over corporations. Yes, working for a small business is very difficult. You have to put your hand in many hats. But I prefer that to like the over-regulation that you can sometimes have when you work for corporate. Like, you have to start at this time and leave at this time, and this is at this time. It's very rigid. It's very like, you know, I quite like the homey family vibe that you get from working in a small business. I quite like that. And you know, get stuck in, getting your hands dirty, it does get stressful at times, but I do kind of like it. But when, you know, when you have certain boundaries and, you know, in a little bit more of a healthy environment than what I necessarily experienced. I was book smart when I first started sixth form. I was book smart. I was a very intelligent girl. All credits to her, my past self. But the wisdom that I now have is completely different. I'm a completely different caliber of human because of what I experienced, and I'm just gonna be so honest with you. If me and my past self were in a fight, I'd win. I would win, because the wisdom is just different. So do not be afraid to give yourself the grace of just experiencing. And with that, I'm going to love you and leave you. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please like, comment, subscribe, all of that good stuff. Let me know what you want to see next. If there's any part of this video that you want me to expand on more. I know I kind of like blitzed through the whole thing. Do let me know. And I'll see you soon. Do you want to know something crazy? I'm sitting with 4 pillows stacked on top of each other so that I can be high enough to reach the camera. Random detail.